He worked 18-hour days from 10 a.m. until 4 a.m. the following morning, 7 days a week. After years of dedication, his labor of love allowed him to become current with his bills and actually take a vacation, although it was a working vacation. He and his wife of 3 years visited every pizzeria they could. Tom's objective was to learn from others how to implement processes that would enable him to handle more business. For Tom, it was an exciting time, and things were really beginning to come together. Tom was eager to grow beyond Ypsilanti and the surrounding area and envisioned expanding Domino's to college towns throughout Michigan. 2 years after his partnership was dissolved, Tom's worst fear became a reality. Well, fear was that.
Fear will become a reality.
His ex-partner declared bankruptcy on Thanksgiving. Tom gave his wife the sobering news. Tom was now responsible for over $75,000 in bad debt. I had worked so hard to build this business, to make it grow, Tom said. I couldn't imagine losing it all. He set up a payment plan with the creditors and promised to pay every penny owed. Now, more determined than ever to succeed, Tom went back to making pizza. The next year, while honoring his commitment to his creditors, Tom managed to make $50,000 in net profit. Unfortunately, his profits were short-lived. A devastating fire wiped out his anchor store, and the insurance covered only $13,000 of the $150,000 in damages. Domino's almost went under. But Tom buckled down, cut back wherever he could, and devised ways to cover the fire losses. Once again, Tom went back to making pizza. On April 1, 1967, the first Domino's franchise opened. Tom's lawyer cautioned him to expand slowly, focus more on managing the business. Tom had no patience for legal details and focused on what he did best, growing the business. Tom continued to drive as hard as ever. His efforts paid off, and a year and a half later, Domino's had risen again. Domino's had grown to a dozen pizzerias with a dozen more in development. Tom found himself being asked to speak at luncheons about his business success. Domino's was maturing as an organization, and talk of going public was in the air. Tom was having the time of his life. Nearly a decade of working 16 to 18-hour days, 7 days a week, was finally paying off. His success seemed too good to be true, and it was. Tom, you got to stop thinking like this. Within 18 months, Tom was out of cash, and Domino's was in financial trouble. Checks were bouncing left and right. His accounting firm quit because Domino's couldn't pay for the service. Without financial statements, Tom had no idea how much he owed. He had trouble believing the $1.5 million figure he saw in the books. He was on the verge of bankruptcy again. We had overexpanded and added new stores to territories before the first stores were fully established, Tom explained. We also made the mistake of sending in untrained managers with no experience to run the new stores and overstaffed our home office. The business community that had praised him only a few months before now treated him like the town idiot. Desperate to save Domino's, Tom began searching for a merging partner or someone who might see the company's potential. Tom couldn't find one. The bank that carried significant loans for Domino's persuaded Tom to bring in a local businessman who was experienced in turning around struggling companies. On May 1st, 1970, Tom Moynihan lost control of his company. Reluctantly, he signed his stock partially to the bank and the remaining interest to the local businessman. He entered into an agreement that allowed him to stay on as president with no authority. Who else could they find willing to work 16-hour days, 7 days a week for a $200 weekly paycheck?
Oh, man.
And seeing that his personal possessions were meager, He still drove an old beat-up car, and the only furniture he owned was a couple of beds and a kitchenette. It was clear he wasn't squandering away the money. Working for someone else was a painful arrangement, but it kept Tom from filing bankruptcy. The new management closed unprofitable pizzerias, cut back on staff, and reorganized what was left. Tom was put in charge of the 12 corporate stores. When he traveled between stores, Tom slept in his car to keep down expenses. Still, it wasn't enough. After 10 months, the local businessman wanted out, deciding Domino's had no future. Since Domino's would probably be in liquidation soon, the businessman agreed to take one of Tom's franchises and give Tom back his stock in return. With Tom back in control of Domino's, he assured his creditors and vendors that he'd pay everyone back if they gave him some time to get back on his feet. Most agreed. His franchisees, however, weren't as sympathetic and filed a class action antitrust suit against Domino's. When Tom received the legal notice, he sat at his desk and wept. Over the next 9 years.
9 years.
Tom slowly built back his business, paying off every last creditor. For 5 years, he fought off a bitter trademark infringement lawsuit brought by the makers of Domino's Sugar. He struggled to survive against a wave of competition within the burgeoning pizza industry. But Tom did more than just survive. He built an unmatched reputation for Domino's as a restaurant that could deliver a tasty, piping hot pizza within 30 minutes to the customer's door. This claim made Domino's the largest home delivery pizza business in the world. And Tom became one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the country with 97% of the company's stock. Tom reached that pinnacle of success despite a difficult childhood, the skiffiest of financial resources, and a little more than a high school education. Tom had every reason to make excuses, to fail, to quit. But quit isn't in Tom Moynihan's vocabulary. Persistence is. And that's it. He has a quote here. I feel all these setbacks, he says, were tools for me to learn from. I used them as stepping stones and didn't see them as failures. A failure is when you stop trying.
I like that. Tremendous.
Domino's Sugar wouldn't even leave him alone.
I know.
Domino's. He's Domino's.
Yeah, I remember that whole
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
cycle of the Domino's situation.
Really?
It was very big in Colorado. Domino's
Surprised the
pizzas
game
had all
Domino's
kinds
didn't
of
do
problems.
too.
And I remember the cycles of going out, stores were closing, and then they finally got them reopened again. And it was a very interesting time period. But I had no idea that, who was behind it and what was going on. But I remember the business problems.
They did set the precedence, though, for getting your pizza there fast, because everybody else was trying to get it there fast,
Yeah,
and that's
the
when
30
the law had
minutes,
to
the
step
30-minute
in. No more than
problem.
30 minutes.
The noise.
Yeah, they had to take that away because
They were hurting people.
yeah, they were hurting people in the
Running people
streets.
down.
People were having accidents. All
Now,
kinds
you're
of
going to be okay, this pizza's hot right now. I just moved you over, but I'll be back.
I'll be back. I gotta get it there within 30 minutes.
Or I got to buy it.
Oh man, it was something. That's something else. And he's accomplished one of his two goals. One was to be the largest. The other was to have the best tasting.
one of the two, right?
So he's probably still working on the other. Because that's not the, well, anyway, that's subject to opinion. And his opinion is, I'm sure. How's that for tremendous? Well, so that's it. Keeping the this is the answer. You only momentarily changed your mental image. Boy, oh boy, talk about keeping a picture in focus for years until he accomplished it. And we want to get annoyed, speaking of annoyed, if we don't reach it in 3 minutes. Well, God, I'll give you 3 minutes, and if you can get it done then, I'm going to try this. How silly. We know some folks in the Word that one fellow was sick for 40 years before he got healed. 40 years. As a matter of fact, more than one had that situation. Years and years and years. That's just something, to be able to still want to be healed. Most people just go, well, it's just God's will for me to be sick. It's not God's will for you to be sick. It's God's will for you to be healed. But what if your believing is just not there? Well, then keep working on it. Is it worth it if it took 40 years? Sure, if you want to be healed. It took this guy how many years now? How many years that was? I don't know. 10, 12, 15?
At least 12.
At least 12, just that story. The release from one's prisons. Okay, we're going to take 10 more minutes and we're done. Or it's free. Let's see. Excuse me, 13 more. The release from one's prisons depends upon two things: clearness and concern. And those, yes, Frankie, it can change, or Betty, concerns can change, yes. You can be clear, and then you can not be concerned anymore about a certain thing, and then, that picture can change. But if you have a prison in your life, or if there's something worth being concerned about, worth being clear and concerned about, then stay on that until you get it. To me, building the world's largest pizza parlor would not have been a concern of the world, but it was to him, and he kept it until he accomplished it. So if it's not worth being concerned about, great, don't picture it. But don't let that be an excuse, well, God doesn't want me to have it. That's not true. As long as it doesn't contradict His Word, He's thrilled with you having it. Go ahead and be the biggest this, the greatest that, the first this, the most wonderful that. We need some Christians doing that kind of. Tom is a Christian Catholic, Roman Catholic. As a matter of fact, he gave, speaking of giving, I forget how much it was. It was something like 50% of his earnings he gave to the Roman Catholic Church.
This guy?
This guy.
What's his?
Tom Monahan.
Oh,
Yep, there you go. See it is.
Moynihan.
Moynihan. Oh, whatever.
Actually, Monahan. M-O-N. Monahan.
Moynihan.
Monahan. I don't know the difference. If Moy is Scottish and Mon is Irish, I don't know. There's a difference.
Man is probably
Yeah,
Scottish.
yeah. Huh?
Man is
And it's a
probably
Macintosh and a Macintosh.
Ah,
Mac
okay.
and Nick.
Yeah, that's right. Mix are Irish, right?
Yeah. Max is Scottish.
Huh. What if someone's named McMack?
McMackowitz.
Then he's confused.
Probably a sandwich by now.
Then his parents didn't get clear on their picture, I guess. Anyway, the two C's of release. Get clear on what is wanted, and then become concerned about receiving it. Another great example that we know of is Richard Williams, who's considered quite the wild, radical guy, but he saw this girl getting a huge check, I think it was 40 grand, if I remember correctly, for winning a tennis tournament, and he made up his mind that he was going to have 2 daughters, and they were both going to be number 1 and number 2 in the world in tennis.
that was before they were born.
That's before they were born. That's before he had sex with his wife to get them born. And sure enough, did that happen?
Yep.
It sure did. It happened, 20 years later? 20, I think one was 19, one was 20. What are they now, 20 and 21?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at 19 and 20, they became number 1 and number 2 in the world. How do you like that? After 20 years. And they weren't even born yet. What does your Father say about you? What did He say about that He knew you before the foundation of the world? See, is that so odd now to think that God could have known you before the foundation of the world? And could have had you in mind, chosen you before you were even born? And had some great plans and ideas and dreams for you before you were even born? When a human being, not a brilliant man as far as education, grew up in a little town where the name of the school was Little Hope. He goes, Little Hope, he goes, it should have been called No Hope, because really it was a hopeless place to be. And yet to get to the point that he could believe before his daughters were even born. First of all, to have daughters, to even make up his mind to have daughters, how do you control that? He wasn't wealthy where they could keep shaking him up in the test tube and seeing, okay, we'll stick this in your wife. This looks like it would be a son or a daughter or what. Huh? How's that for wild? That's really wild. What about you? What could you do? And me, right? Oh, man. Get God's word of deliverance in and release into your mind and into your heart. How do you do that? Eat it. What's that mean? Well, in the morning at breakfast, have your little card there that you look at. Drink it when you have your coffee or whatever. You could write at the bottom of your coffee cup, I suppose, with indelible ink or something. And when you get to the bottom of the cup, look at that. I'm going to be whatever.
His focus in there.
What?
His focus is a lot on my cup.
There you go. There's a lot of ways you do. It's a figure of speech. Eat it, drink it, sleep it, walk with it. And he tells you what the figure is. Every time you take a step, or every time you think about your situation or condition, thank God that the answer and your release is coming. And I used to do this in situations. I'd be out somewhere and I'd think, oh man, how are you going to make that much in that period of time? And I'd go, but my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. I just say it out loud. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, shall abound to every good work. May abound to every good work. I mean, I just, out loud sometimes. No, I didn't always do it out loud with a bunch of people, but I'd be walking somewhere, and this weird thought that was the opposite of my picture would come to mind, and I'd just say the other thought out loud. Hey, you might not think of this individual as a great actor, but he's an extremely well-paid actor. This Canadian-born actor would go up to the top of a hill overlooking the city, and he wrote out on a check $10 million, which is what he was going to get paid for doing a movie. His first movie, Pet Detective. No, actually, that wasn't his first movie. First movie where he got well paid was Pet Detective. By his second movie, which I think was Mask, he got paid $10 million. That man was Jim Carrey.
He slept in his car too because he was home.
With his family.
That must be one of the ways to do it. Sleep in your
Yeah,
car.
sleep in your car.
Add this to one of the techniques.
Lose everything.
Your car. Finally, you got a car that's big enough.
I'll just sleep in Chuck. There you are.
You're on the verge of greatness.
Can we sleep in your car? The gentleman I'm in business with right now was down to his last $20 in California. He was there with a friend. They had been living and eating their meals based on his credit card, and his credit card was finally tapped. And he was down to his last $20 in cash. His associate didn't not really understand, so he said to him, just want to let you know, we only have $20 left. And the guy looks at him and says, and he just told me this part of the story yesterday.
Yeah.
The guy looks at him and says, well, it's okay, because I know of a place where we can go and sleep for free, and they'll give us free meals. And Lee looked at him and said, he looked at him, he says, I looked at him like he was out of his mind. He goes, and I realized he hadn't hit bottom yet. He goes, I had already hit bottom and was on my way up. See the difference? The other guy was still willing to go further down. It's important. It's life-changing when you draw that line in the sand or in granite and you say, I am not going past this line. I am not going any further down. The direction change starts right here. I told that to a girl 2 days ago, that she needed to make that decision right then. But otherwise you keep going. You keep going down until you go, this is as far as I'm, and he made that decision, and what was it, 1 year later, he left California with $1 million in cash.
And he had a yacht.
And a yacht. That's right, and a yacht. Now he and I are doing business, and he's earning $100,000 net a month. Cash. Actually more than that. That's why he's willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I want to talk about it. But like his partner said, there's more to the story. There's even more than that. I'm sure some people.
Now someday we'll hear the whole story, but that he told me that yesterday. I thought, that's tremendous. Now this guy's lifestyle I would not emulate at all. But that believing, it works for saint, it works for sinner, it works. This is how it works. This is how we do it. Whatever. This is what works. You put that picture in your mind, and you believe it has nothing to do with luck. You're 2 minutes ahead of me, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with luck. Has nothing to do with all the stuff that you think it has to do with. It has everything to do with if God says you can have it, you put that in your mind, you eat it, you drink it, you sleep it, you walk with it. Every time you take a step, every time you think about your situation or condition, thank God that the answer in your release is coming. Next word. Soon. Soon the negatives drop off. How soon? Soon. Was it a long time? Soon. And the positives become yours, the result of which is release from any prison you are in. It can be done. It will be done. For as Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. That's it. Okay, I have the tape running. If anyone has anything to share that they'd like to go on tape, you can share it now. There may be things more personal you'd not like to have on tape, because there may be thousands and millions of people that listen to this tape someday. So,
I'd like to share that.
on or
Because
Okay.
I was down to $50. 50. That's all the money I had left. I was living in Davie. I had thousands of dollars in mortgages to pay, and I was about ready to lose the house. And I lost the house on top of it. And that's all I had, but I had decided at that time that I was going to turn that around and get the job that I was looking for that had not come to pass up to that point. It had not come. And the money that I had made up to that point wasn't enough to keep my expenses going. And that house just sat there ready, and it was in foreclosure at that time. And I went out and just made that decision. I said, this is it. It's not going past this. I've been here before. I've been able to do it, and I'm going to do it right now. And sure enough, within that same week, I got a call from a friend who said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm working. Everything's cool. I'm lying like crazy. He says, well, let's have lunch. I said, sure, I'll go back. I didn't want to work for him again. I had worked for him before, and I didn't want to work for him again. So I went up there to see him anyway. He said, how you doing? I said, oh, yeah, I'm doing these things, and I'm okay, and I'm doing this and doing that. He says, I know a guy that has a business over here, and it's a pool company, and he's looking for a salesman. You might give him a call. I asked him who it was, and I knew the company, and I said, oh, that guy, he's terrible. His work is, I don't know. His work is okay, but he's not the kind of guy I want to work for. His offices are down on Funston Street in Hollywood. Oh, if you ever know that neighborhood, it's nothing but car wrecks in there and used car dealers. I said, I can't bring clients to a place like that. And I was just thinking negative, totally negative.
Mm-hmm.
So go down and see him. So I said, okay, when I get a chance, when I get around to it, I'll go down and see him. So finally one day I said, yeah, I think I'll just wander down. About 2 days later when I realized that, that $50 is now becoming $30. And I've got to do something very quick, very fast. So I went down there, and I talked to the guy, and, walked in with a swagger and told him that, I could take this place over and I could make him tons of money. And this is what I wanted. I want the commission, I want this, I want that. And he thought for a moment, and he said, well, okay. He says, go ahead and do it. So I asked him if he had any leads. Anybody had called in lately. He says, yeah, but I usually go see him. I said, do you have anybody there that you don't want to go see? Anybody that you saw that said that they weren't interested? So he gave me 2 or 3. Went out there it couldn't have been 4 days. I had brought back a contract for a pool within 4 days. That was a small one, I remember. It's about $13,000. But then I came back with a $100,000 contract for a pool. And he couldn't even understand how we would sell one for that kind of money. They never sold anything over $10,000. He was only selling to contractors, and the contractors were beating him down to $8,000 pools and $7,000 pools and $6,000 pools. I mean, that was barely his cost. And he neglected his residential market because he had no personality. He was sloppy. He drove around in a broken down truck. His office was a disaster. I never wanted to bring anybody there. Never did. As far as I know, I never